and at home who is helping with our service this morning. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalists Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Those values and principles move us to remember that we in Northampton inhabit unceded lands of the Pecumtuck and Nipmuc peoples. Our values and principles remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to face the legacies of dispossession and systematic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we affirm and celebrate the legacies that inspire us. We are here to support and celebrate one another and to renew ourselves with hope and gratitude and new resolve. This morning, our service is on Zoom and YouTube, and I think we have about 35 people in the Great Hall, including everybody helping to run everything. It's really wonderful to see everybody here. We continue to appreciate your patience and goodwill as we learn how to do worship in person and online. If you're wondering what it's like to be here in person and comfortable with the precautions we're taking, we really hope that you'll give it a try. If you are new or returning after a time away, welcome. We're glad you're here. Please feel free to fill out a welcome card, which you can put in the offering plate here on the chancel, over here, after the service. Doing that allows us to put you on our email contact list. For those of you online, there is a link in the chat. Those of you here in person, thank you for wearing your masks. Please also check to make sure that you and anyone in your group are sitting 6 feet away from the next person or group. We ask everyone online to please remain muted throughout the service and turn off your videos except during the greeting in order to keep the technology running as smoothly as possible. There is no social hour today because this is our congregational gathering Sunday, so there is no gathering afterwards. We're going to be encouraged to join the conversations at 11:30, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. And now we'll begin our service.
As we come together this morning, let us renew both our commitment and our covenant. For those who are grieving losses, may their hope be uplifted. For those who are wrestling with questions that seem to have no answer, may they find renewed strength. For those who are cherishing joys, may we all join in their celebration. And may we covenant to honor the many paths that have led each of us to this community.
I invite you to rise for our chalice lighting. We are still asking those of you in the Great Hall to refrain from singing, but I hope you will hum gently or sing in your minds. And those of you online, please sing aloud for everyone here. We promise ourselves to the idea that we are each and all human beings. We promise that there is something moving between us that we cannot tame and cannot measure. The chalice is a reminder that what flame we keep inside us cannot light the way. The light must spill to shine.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let beauty, truth, and earth be sung through every land, by every tongue. De todos bajo el gran sol surja esperanza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza cantando. De caras tierra caramos.
You know how this is for people in the Great Hall because, oh, all of you had the wrong words to the chalice lighting up there, which is too bad because they're lovely words, but they are part of the gatherings conversation. So you'll hear them again if you get a chance to be part of that, one of the gatherings conversations. And I feel like I have to, a lot of times in the beginning of the book, you'll have acknowledgements and they'll list all the people that they thank. And then they say, but all mistakes are of course my own. So that's what I have to say. All mistakes are mine. Today's service is inspired by the topic for our annual small group gatherings, which are happening this morning at 11:30 by Zoom and here in the Great Hall. And if you haven't signed up and would like to stay, the ones in the Great Hall are going to start at 11:15. And everyone can gather here. Everyone can gather here, and then half of you will meet in here and half of you will meet in the parlor, appropriately, adequately spread out. And probably Julie Quinsman, who's over there, and Kathy are gonna lead them. And what you might want to do is bring up some extra chairs from downstairs for in here so that people can sit in a circle rather than sitting in the pews. Okay. Okay, great. So, and everyone else, you're welcome to come back at 11:30 and join on Zoom. To whom or what are you promised? What do your promises mean to you? I hope many of you will participate. The Stewardship Committee initiated these fall gatherings now 5 or 6 years ago, and once upon a time they included brunch at a member's home, and more recently we've been doing them over Zoom. Many of you have spoken about how meaningful these meetings have been for you. So, and you have appreciated getting to meet people that you haven't met before. The Zoom link is the same one as for the Sunday service. Those of you who are on Zoom, you're welcome to remain on Zoom and just go away, mute yourselves, turn your video off so we can't see what you're doing, and then you can come back at 11:30 and be placed in a group. Our religious education services have begun already, promptly at 10, so we don't have a story. But let's rise again and join here in humming and online in singing together the words to hymn number 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Here we have gathered, gathered side by side. Circle of kinship, step and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetimes, matter small and great. We of all ages, neighbors, kin and men, infants and sages, sharing as we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather share each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
This reading comes from a UU history curriculum called Faith Like a River, which was written by Allison Cornish and Jackie Clement. Allison actually spoke here last June. Some of you might remember. They are both UU ministers. Some of you, oh, okay. This is from a session on covenant that they wrote. The free church tradition of which we are a part does not offer up a creed, a certain set of beliefs that everyone must accept in order to belong to a community. Instead, the boundaries of our community are determined by commitment and participation. Our central question is not what do we believe, but rather what values will we uphold and how will we do it together. Our covenant, the promises we make to each other about how we will be a community of faith, is this at the heart of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. When the early Puritans came to America looking to form a new type of church, they chose to gather their churches using the ancient form of covenant. And those first churches were created by mutual consent for mutual benefit in a time and place where survival depended on mutual cooperation. And Unitarian and Universalist churches, particularly Unitarian churches, are inheritors of that Puritan tradition, that particular aspect of the Puritan tradition. The churches were also a reaction to a form of church organization that put all the power and control in the hands of a church hierarchy. So our freedom of belief is closely tied to the freedom of self-governance, which is called congregational polity. Around 1880, the Reverend Charles Gordon Ames, minister of the Spring Garden Unitarian Society in Philadelphia, wrote a covenant for his congregation. And if you've been in other UU churches, you may have heard this one. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human needs, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. That was from 1880. And there's another one from 1894 that is still used. It was written by the Reverend James Vila Blake, who served at that time the Unitarian Church of Evanston, Illinois. Love is the spirit of this church and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Simple. Now it's time for us to greet one another. And those of you online, turn on your videos. And those of you here, well, we could try it. Okay, if you're over here, does anybody object to being on very distantly on Zoom? I'm gonna let you wave to the people online. We'll see if this works. Yeah, there you are. Oh, nope, no, you're not. You can do it, Zoomies. Molly, oh, there's Lori. Where's everybody else? Oh, I need to put this on, wait a minute. I know what I need to do. Ha. Yes, they will remute them. Actually, they're not muted. They're muted. They have no power of speech.
Yes,
only you have power of speech. Exercise your power of speech. Say hello. Hello. We can't sing, but we can talk.
It's so confusing.
It's great to see you online too. Does anyone have anything they want to say? I'll read it from the chat.
I think we can speak.
Sorry your video is disabled, Sarah. I hope it comes back.
Yeah, but you can hear us.
I hope everyone got a nice extra
We're
hour
not
of
really
sleep this
muted.
morning.
I think we can
It's
speak
great to
amongst
see you
ourselves.
all.
Yes, oh, we can, yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Trying
All our
something new,
videos
as
have
you
stopped.
can
The
tell.
host has stopped all our
That's why
videos.
those of you who wanted to come and talk to each other at 9:45 weren't able to do it. Because we were. You will come to the greeting, the gathering at 11:30 or 11:15 if you're here. And now it's time for Julie.
Can't start my video. Who's the host?
Our generosity makes everything we do possible, and it helps us to support organizations and movements in the greater community. Half of the proceeds of each week's offering support the Society's operating budget, and half are shared outside our walls. You can mail in a check or donate online. The link is in the chat. You may also put cash or check in the offering plate here on the chancel after the service. Thank you. And now we'll listen to our offertory music.
Our meditation comes from something written by Howard Thurman. Keep fresh before me the moment of my high resolve, that in good time or in tempests, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. We'll take a moment together in silence. Our second reading is from UU Minister Nancy Schaefer. It's called Prayer for This Church. May each one of us have skin that longs to touch other skin, fingertips that long for other fingertips, or whole hands and even arms, bodies that want to stand next to other bodies, not alone while singing and bending, stirring soup. May ones whose skin doesn't cry out for other skin wish it did, and so teach it, so that no one stands alone and no one aches and does not say so. May our doors be so open it is drafty inside, and people sometimes shout because noises without come also within. May those sheltered here sometimes cry all at once, letting tear water clean what words by themselves cannot. May we always have enough room for those who want to come in. May those who cherish this place be so glad they cannot stop speaking. And may we notice each one who is new and invite them to stay. Our next hymn is number 317, We Are Not Our Own. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and stop asking me if I want my volume turned on. give to earth and all things living, little trees of care. Let us be a house of welcome, living stone upholding, living stone, gladly showing our neighbors we are not our own. Some people are used to keeping rules. Don't cross the street when the light is red. Only sensible. It turns out that keeping rules isn't the same as keeping covenant, which asks us, instead of a bright line, to keep a promise. To what have we promised ourselves? Teresa I. Soto wrote those words, from which our chalice lighting, which you couldn't see, was also taken. You'll hear them again a bit later if you participate in one of the gathering conversations. Keeping rules is not the same as staying in covenant. Now, it turns out we use the word covenant here quite a bit to describe guidelines that we'd like people to adhere to when we're working on something together. The current board covenant spells out some very good practices, like taking time to listen fully and air all points of view before coming to a decision, making decisions in the best interest of the entire congregation and not just our own particular needs or ideas. And the board covenant also mentions modeling right relations for the rest of the congregation. The children often come up with similar ideas for their RE classes. And they also talk about, in fact, our coming of age class today, one of the things that they're going to work on is their covenant. They come up with the similar ideas that the board has using slightly different words, like raise your hand before you speak, give other people a chance, stay in your own chair. That's a good one. Those guidelines give examples of how to model right relations. But what lies underneath them? To what fundamentally are we committed? What do we promise to one another and to the congregation as a whole? Staying in covenant means keeping our promises, and as I mentioned and have mentioned before, it means we do our best to stay stuck together when we or someone else falls short, when we break our promises. We all fall short. So being in covenant means making repairs and beginning again. Allison Cornish and Jackie Clement wrote that our covenant, the promises we make to each other in regarding how we will be a community of faith, is at the heart of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. So, do we make promises to one another as members, as participants in this faith community? And if so, can you recite them aloud? It turns out, I know quite a few of you here and probably remember this, the Board of Trustees, this was before my time, proposed that this congregation adopt a covenant, a written covenant. Craig Driesen was on the board at this time, having stepped into a term as president. And I asked him to share his memories of what happened. He dug out some documents from his files, including a brief memo that he'd written to the board and a copy of a brochure that included the proposed final language. So I was curious about how the idea to craft a written covenant came about. And Craig suggested that it probably came about as a response to some of the struggles that the congregation was facing at the time, worries about finances, about the ways people handled disagreements, about how many people were and were not willing to pitch in and help, questions about what it meant to really be a member and what members might expect of one another. And apparently a small group of people, including someone from the board, crafted a document, and the board voted to accept it, and it was presented at a congregational meeting, probably the May annual meeting some year, 2003 probably, or 4. Craig does not have happy memories of that meeting. At the time, the president moderated the annual meeting. So what happened was the first thing at the meeting was that a new slate, the slate for the next year, was elected. And then at that moment, the new president took over and was the moderator. Now what we do is we elect a moderator who's somebody who's somewhat familiar with Robert's rules and knows, kind of is experienced in running this kind of a meeting. But anybody who was the president just had to step in and boom, run the meeting at that point. So that was Craig's lucky job. And when the proposal came up, there were forcefully stated objections of all kinds, calls for votes on this wording change and that wording change, outraged rejections of the idea that anyone should be forced to subscribe to any set of rules. All of that flew around the Great Hall. I don't know, those of you who were here, is that a fair? Yes, I see nods. Yes, that's what happened. Okay, Janet's going like this. So, needless to say, the motion did not pass. The idea was tabled. A revision was drafted to be voted on later, and I think that's the brochure that Craig had, but other matters became more pressing and the whole thing was just dropped. Now, I don't think this is a story that's unique to the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. Somebody's nodding there, so probably those of you who've been in other congregations might resonate with some of this. It turns out that just this past year, a UUA appointed committee published a report on covenant making within our congregation. Just came out a few months ago. And they noted that they often heard that a barrier congregations face is, this is a quote, endless wordsmithing and bickering over language. So Craig and I, in our conversation, we agreed that in this congregation, we've gotten a lot better at doing things like this. Looking back to that abandoned covenant writing process, he reflected that the process itself was flawed. He said there was no congregational input. Since then, we've learned and practiced listening to each other. We've gotten better at sharing different points of view with respect and consideration. Our decision about sanctuary in 2018 is an example. We did a lot of information gathering, and there were many, many listening circles way before we put the issue to a vote. Before that, a few years before that, 2014, 15 maybe, the decision to divest our legacy fund from fossil fuels taught us a lot about how to listen to each other and address different points of view. And the steps taken to adopt the mission statement, which was back in 2008 and 2009, were very, very participative. As part of that work, there was a well-attended, facilitated workshop at the high school that I'm sure some of you went to as part of the process, and that was including all ages. Somewhere in the recent UUA report, there's a suggestion that a mission statement can in fact be a covenant. And I'd say maybe. I'd say a mission statement may contain an aspect of covenant. Ours says this. It says the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence is a welcoming and inclusive intergenerational congregation of diverse spiritual beliefs and practices. Our mission is to build a caring community where children and adults can safely learn and grow, where we are supported and challenged on life's journeys, called to service in our higher selves, and inspired to better our world. That mission statement expresses aspirations. Aspirations of being welcoming and inclusive, caring for, supporting and challenging one another, providing a source of inspiration for justice and service. Their intentions and aspirations that I can and I think do guide choices made in teams and committees and on behalf of the congregation as a whole. And at both the board and the coordinating council meetings, people say the covenant, they recite the covenant before the meeting. And I have been in many conversations where people will remember it and bring it back and say, is this consistent with our mission? So those ideas suggest that to which we are committed, and they point to what we promise to one another and to the congregation as a whole. But I think they probably stop short of making the commitment explicit or suggest what's at its root. So one thing to think about is what promises you make in your life outside of this congregation. Ask yourself, to what fundamentally? To what are you committed? To what are you committed? To whom and about what do you make promises? And what is at their root? Now, a marriage or other committed partnership is a covenantal relationship, which we know the aspect of falling short and making repair is very present in a marriage. And aside from, if you're in a committed relationship like that, have you made promises to those with whom you're in covenant? Explicit promises? Can you recite them aloud? I've been thinking a lot about families as we're approaching the holiday time, siblings, and of course, parents and children. If you are a parent, you make or have made promises to your children and promises to yourself about your children. And Jess and Marcus are here with Ashton. At our first service this year, they made promises to each other and to their daughter and to Charlie, their son, in our blessing service. We make promises to our children, borrowing from our mission statement, our society's mission statement, to help them safely learn and grow, to protect and support them while they need us. And I think we also make a commitment to be there for them at any age, to do our best to help them get up when they fall. Or you may have or have had an aging parent to whom you've made a commitment to do your best to be there for them, to help them get up when they fall, literally and figuratively, to honor their dignity and their needs. Many of you are also deeply, deeply committed to something beyond your personal relationships, to working for justice or decency, to trying to stem the climate emergency, to the work that you do, your professional work, to the arts. What promises and commitments do you make? Can you speak them aloud? And what is at their root? We can go deeply into that question for ourselves and for ourselves as a community. What are our promises and commitments? And what is at their root? I do know this. I know that love is at the root. Love for one another, love for all of creation, wonder and gratitude that we are not our own, awe at our place in the interdependent web of life, which we recognize always as a gift. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing or humming or simply saying aloud the words to yourself for our hymn number 318, We Would Be One. We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free. Please be seated. Why community? To remember that one is not a whole number, that we need both roots and wings, that strength comes from relationship and mutuality, and that we know life in and through one another. And with those words from Pamela Romanchik, I hope you go out into this beautiful fall day with spirits renewed. I hope you enjoy the conversations for those of you who are going to be joining them. Go in hope and go in peace.